Did you know that a small group of soldiers once defended a church for nearly a year, fighting a war that had already ended? This is the story of the Siege of Baler, the famous last stand of Spanish troops in the Philippines. The year is 1898. In the remote town of Baler, on the island of Luzon, a small detachment of 50 Spanish soldiers, led by Captain Enrique de las Morenas, took refuge inside the local stone church. They were surrounded by over 800 Filipino revolutionaries who wanted them to surrender. But the Spanish had food, ammunition, and thick walls. They decided to hold their ground. What they didn't know was that while they were trapped inside that church, the world outside was changing. The Spanish-American War had ended. The Treaty of Paris was signed in December 1898, and Spain had ceded the Philippines to the United States. But the men in Baler had no idea. They were completely cut off from all communication. The Filipino forces tried everything to convince them to come out. They showed them newspapers announcing the end of the war. They even sent Spanish civilians and a Spanish officer to the church doors to tell them it was over. But Lieutenant Saturnino Martin Cerezo, who took command after Captain Las Morenas died of disease, refused to believe it. He was convinced it was all a trick. Inside the church, life became a nightmare. Food ran out. They were forced to eat dogs, cats, reptiles, snails, and even crows to survive. Sickness like beriberi and dysentery spread in the hot, cramped space. By the end, only around 30 soldiers were still alive and standing. They held on for 337 days. Can you imagine? For nearly a year, they defended that church, unaware that their country had already made peace and given up the islands. The end finally came in June of 1899. Filipino forces, now led by Colonel Simon Texan, made one final attempt. They brought a Spanish officer named Lieutenant Colonel Aguilar to the church with recent newspapers from Madrid. Martin Cerezo looked through them and found an article about a close friend of his back in Spain. It mentioned personal details that the Filipino forces could not possibly have known. At that moment, it finally hit him. The war was truly over. They had been fighting for nothing. On June 2nd, 1899, the surviving soldiers marched out of the church and surrendered their arms. But here is the most beautiful part of the story. When the Filipino leader, President Emilio Aguinaldo, heard about their incredible bravery, he did not treat them as enemies. Instead, he issued a decree calling them friends, not prisoners. He admired their courage and loyalty. He allowed them to go home to Spain with honor. Today, the Siege of Baler is not remembered as a story of defeat, but as a symbol of friendship. Every year on June 30th, the Philippines and Spain celebrate Philippine-Spanish Friendship Day to honor the day those brave soldiers finally came out of that church and a new bond of peace began. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this incredible true story, please like and subscribe for more history.